Now, you mentioned the interview your father did at the conservative synagogue. Um, I know they've done other
Yes.
tapes about their
Yes.
experiences.
They did other tapes. They did the Visual History Foundation, Hashoah Visual History Foundation tape that's Steven Spielberg financed from the proceeds of Schindler's List, which, by the way, my mother saw. Again, talking about.
Did she go by herself?
I think she went with a group from the synagogue or something. My father, again, could never, ever watch something like that. But my mother was able to do that. So they both did that tape, and my father started speaking more publicly about his experiences. By the 1990s, again, things had changed completely. Synagogues were doing Yom HaShoah remembrances. My parents were being called up all the time to light candles. You know, there was a new younger generation that started to view my parents as heroes. That actually, you know, I don't know if the older generation was jealous or looked down or what the view was, but the younger people, the younger men and women growing up, you know, they started having this different view and looking at my parents, and rightly so, as heroes or as people who had lived through, again, one of the most defining moments in modern Judaism, modern Jewish history.
Did your parents feel this difference in the way they were looked at? There was no longer anything to be ashamed about? The people were admiring them?
Yeah, you could sense the difference. First of all, my mother, she started going to protest and speaking out. She went to Soviet Jewish rallies. She went to rallies in support of Israel. She kind of said finally that she has a voice, you know, after all these years. And, I'm sorry, and my you know, my father just started to speak, you know, almost, you know, at a lot of opportunities. He started speaking about his experiences. He started opening up. He started connecting the experiences, you know, chronologically for the first time. You know, he started a big thing, something I'm not sure you know. Well, I think you do know. He I'm trying to think what year it was. In 1995, it was one of the, again, I'm not doing my math too well, 50 year anniversary of the liberation. We went to a synagogue in Brooklyn, and me and my father and my mother had it was very Orthodox, so my mother had to sit behind the curtain. But and for the first time, it was a synagogue led by a rabbi who had been a survivor of Ebenzeh. And it was a kind of reunion for Ebenzeh survivors. And that was just amazing. You know, it was amazing to me because honestly, before any of that, I had never heard anybody else talk about Ebenzeh. The thousands of people were killed there, thousands were liberated. I had never heard about Ebenzeh except for my father. You know, so to see all these other men sitting in the room, rich and poor, you know, well-dressed and kind of shabby, you know, religious, non-religious, and, you know, I'm kind of analytically looking at them saying, you know, what made them survive? You know, what's the common thread here? Which, you know, at least by appearances you can't tell. But you know, that was a huge experience, being in the room with all these guys who had shared this experience. My father, I remember my father meeting a guy who was who knew somebody my father knew. There had been a capo, you know, a boss in the barrack, a gypsy. Tony, you've heard about Tony. And you know, who actually pulled my father out of the line to the crematoria once, and was generally good to him, even though he was vicious and killed other people. Anyway, this other guy said, yeah, I know what happened to Tony. After the liberation, a prisoner who he had wronged got a knife and killed him. Yeah.
And your father hadn't known that before.
My father didn't know, and he's, whoa, you know. or if he did know it, he didn't talk about it, but it was like startling. Yeah, that Tony didn't make it, you know, and well, maybe rightfully so. But
So I assume also you've seen the tapes that your parents
yes,
have made.
absolutely, yes, which has a profound impact again.
Is there any particular aspect of what they went through that hits you the most or that causes you the most pain?
First of all, in watching the tape of my father from the visual history tape, he's crying for much of this very early. It's not like the tape he made for the video he made for Manhattan College, where he shows this profound ability to articulate and hold up. You know, it was much earlier, the visual history tape, and he cried for much more of that. And it becomes painful. He's dabbing at the tears, and he has a tissue he's using, and nobody's giving him a new tissue, and the tissue is crumpling, and the little pieces of paper are stuck on his face, and I just want to, I want to clean his face, and it's very frustrating, very helpless feeling, seeing him cry on that tape. You know, again, the Manhattan College one was just amazing.
Have you shown your children any of the tapes?
Not yet. No, not yet. It's just, it's one of the things that I intend to do. I want to make sure it's a time where they're going to sit down and appreciate it. With the 20-year-old, it's just a matter of, she's been away now a year and a half, on and off. She comes back, but with the little ones, time sometimes just isn't there. I will sit her down. I will show it to her. I'm sure she'll be able to appreciate and understand. She knows a lot more about the story. I've told her much more.
Have your children taken any courses in or read any books?
Not that I'm aware of, no. And, I'm realizing that as I'm saying this to you, that, this is an important responsibility, that maybe I've neglected, not out of any intent, but more out of, where does the time go kind of thing. Yes. By the way, I should say in the Hashoah tapes, my mother, whereas my father, again, it was much more difficult. My mother, her spirit, her positive attitude, her love of humanity comes out just incredibly. The fact that she could see such viciousness, such violence and bestiality, and come out of there with her view that ultimately humankind is good is just amazing.
Did you find that your parents' physical health was affected as they got older in any way by having been starved and in your father's case beaten?
It's amazing, but Baruch Hashem, my father is going to be 90 years old in a week, and with my mother too, I have not seen evidence of any physical malady that relates to my father having been beaten and starved, and my mother having, I'm surely, been malnourished and terrified. As I think I told you, my mother has suffered this depression. And, my father also has a depression from time to time. They both take medicine for depression, many elderly people do that in any event who didn't go through this. There's certainly no stigma associated with that. But for my mother, who has this more significant depression that is very difficult to treat, ultimately, thank God we have. But what happens, what I've told my mother, and I think she agrees with me, as I told her, millions of people died during the war, millions of other people were injured. I tell my mother, this is the bullet that's still in you that we can't get out, and it really is. Yeah.
In line with that, you find they're discussing more with you now that, older people tend to look back on their lives and of course they've given interviews, but in
Yes.
terms of sort of a philosophical reflection on how they survived their experiences
Yeah.
and have reached this age, is that coming out more with you as now?
Yeah, I think they're definitely looking at things more philosophically, especially my father, you know, because my father still talks about it more than my mother, you know, but I think they, you know, have a more philosophical view about it. I think both of them have come a long way in coming to terms with what happened to them and what happened to their families. I think they've, you know, I think for my mother the biggest feeling was the guilt. You know, here she was in Hungary, in Budapest. She was not in the village when everybody was taken and ultimately slaughtered, you know, except for one sister who survived with her. You know, so I think for my mother the biggest feeling was guilt, but I think over the years she's come to terms with that. And I know she suffered from that feeling of guilt for many years. For my father, you know, I think he's come to terms with the fact that, to some extent, based on the adulation of younger people, to him he realizes the heroic nature of his survival and what he did. And I think he's come to, you know, appreciate that. And, you know, I think also, you know, a couple of years ago, when was it, maybe 2007, my father had a perforated bowel, and he almost died. He was in intensive care in an induced coma for over a week after like 7 hours of surgery. He now has a colostomy bag, which is, you know, very difficult to deal with. It's a very difficult way to, you know, live. But you know, I think we've talked about it in, you know, in the past couple of years, and I think we appreciate that this is kind of his bonus time. You know, this is the time. His time now is the time that he has for his suffering and his courage. And I'm pretty sure, based on one of the stories he told me, that he saved somebody's life at one point, a young boy who was being used, you know, to pleasure the Nazis, that he saved by telling them he was one of his assistant tailors. He also, once Tony, in the story that my father has said on the Manhattan College video, at one time Tony the capo was holding down a person and told my father, you know, step on his neck, I want you to kill him. And my father refused to do it. So I don't know if karma is, you know, within the Jewish religion or not, or mitzvot, or a good deed, or what. But I think for all of those things, maybe this is the bonus time that my father has deserved. And thank God, you know, at 89 and whatever, he's making the best of it and having the most positive, a wonderful experience at Hebrew Home, but also the most positive attitude towards life I've ever seen him have. You know, most people when they get to this age, you know, they're done, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're bitter, you know, or they can't smile, or laugh. Crazy for women. He, you know, kisses women's hands. He loves the little ones. He loves talking to them on the phone or seeing them. We have to try to prevent them from picking up the little ones over his head. You know, it's what a blessing from God.
Have you been involved in any second generation groups or activities?
You know, unfortunately, I have not. I have found that, you know, and again, maybe this goes back to the other thing, but with a family with 5 children, you know, between work and coming home to them, you know, it seems to consume all my time. I have not been able to do that. I don't even know if a second generation of group exists up in Albany, to be honest with you. I know there's a Friends of Hashoah group, sponsored by the Federation. I don't know how active they are. One thing I've tried to do, maybe this is the one positive thing, is I'm now teaching course at this community high school. You know, I remember how I told you I had interned many years ago with that kind of radical rabbi at a previous version of the same thing. I'm now teaching a class there, and you know, basically I'm doing either current events or history. So in a previous class I did famous and infamous Jews, and I took a big, you know, and I found an amazing opportunity to work with the kids. Jews at the possibly at the expense of many others. He had intimate knowledge of the Nazi death camps, but in order to save the 1,000, refused to tell other people in the Jewish community about the information he had. It was later released anyway, but he did not say it. He ultimately was assassinated in Tel Aviv by some young right-wing Jewish Holocaust survivors for that. But again, you know, we talked about his experience. Was again, he a hero? He you know, he made each person who rode the train pay a substantial amount of money, but some people had no money, and he charged the richer Jews more so that he could save some of the poorer Jews. He also saved a very important, I believe one of the Rabbi Teitelbaums from the Satmar Hasidim was on the train. So, you know, I had the kids analyze whether he was a hero or a victim. I think a important moment, you know, and I forgot about this when you were asking me about Joelle, but one of the proudest moments for me is when Joelle was in high school. She was taking a program called the International Baccalaureate degree, which is kind of a college-related thing. You know, it's kind of an international program, and she had to do an extended essay on a something that happened before, you know, 1950, and what she did was, you know, and I forgot all about this. She did her extended essay on resistance during the Holocaust, and she talked about Rumkowski because she had been in my high school class. I was very pleased at that. I forgot all about that. And she also, you know, talked about my father in the essay. You know, but the fact that he went along, you know, that just completely slipped my mind. So
she does know a lot about it.
She does know a lot more than, you know.
And you've obviously kept reading past college. You still are involved in learning more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And teaching it now.
There's so much more to learn. There's so much more to learn. And, you know, it's very interestingly now I'm doing a current events class, and the first thing that we talked about in the class was the proposed Islamic Community Center near Ground Zero in Manhattan. So we talked about their views about this, and we talked about, you know, anti-Muslim sentiment and how it's building in this country, and if Muslims have almost inherited the anti-Semitism that used to be directed only to Jews. I showed them a number of pictures of anti-Muslim graffiti and that kind of thing. You know, so hopefully, you know, I can still do some of those tie-ins.
You really feel that being a child of survivors is an integral part of your life.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there any way that you can sum up in a few sentences what it's meant to you?
I could try. I think that it's kind of a crazy thing that, as I think I said before, probably the historical event which most defines a person's life, at least in my case, happened before I was born. And it really has. It's been the, you know, in so many ways, you know, people have told me, you know, well, maybe I'm going off the subject here, but people have said I have a lot of personality aspects of a child of survivors, you know, whatever those things are. I won't get into that now. But
No, it got into
Yeah.
that. What do
Yeah,
you mean?
I mean, I can be very apologetic. I've been told that's a constant. Again, I never rebelled from my parents, and always tried to please them, always wanted them to be happy, was very worried about their sadness, very devoted to my family at all costs. I think something I've inherited from my father is, and I try not to do this because it has other ramifications, but my father always brought home tons of food to us, and my mother cooked tons of food for us, and I try not to do that, but, I always want my kids to eat. I think that comes from that, But again, to sum up, again, the most defining aspect of my life occurred before I was born. I've had much happiness in my life. I'm very grateful to my parents. I would dedicate this, whatever happens with this interview, I would dedicate my words both to my parents and to the liberators from the 3rd U.S. Cavalry, in much gratefulness and appreciation for having saved my parents' life and thus saving my life and the lives of my children. Without my parents, without the 3rd Cavalry, without the U.S. Army, none of us would have been here today. I once was at a 3rd Cavalry reunion. This is another big thing for my father. In 1997, we went to a 3rd Cavalry reunion with all these old blood and guts veterans of World War II who were still a little younger at that time. And, they were just great. And, I told them the old Jewish concept that a person who saves one life is if they save the world. And I told the men and their wives sitting in a room that they had saved the world, which is true. And, I'm pleased that I'm still in touch with one of the liberators. My father and I call him every Memorial Day, every Veterans Day, Christmas time. He's wonderful. Their names were Acton Dick Pamonte and Bob Persinger. The commanding officer was Timothy Brennan, who he passed away before I had the privilege of meeting him. But,
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Something I may not have asked?
I'm just at this point very thankful for every day I have with my parents. They are a blessing, they're a gift, they're my best friends. I have the best parents in the world, and I love them very dearly.
Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you one more question
Sure,
myself.
of course.
Why did you feel you wanted to participate in this project?
I think it's so important to, perpetuate an understanding. And, it's an understanding that you can't appreciate from a history book. It's just not the same thing as hearing it, Clearly I haven't experienced the same things my parents have, but, but it's important to even, going forward, we're all, if my parents are survivors and I'm their children, there's stuff that maybe I can relate that'll help in somebody's understanding of, of this Holocaust, of this genocide. Hopes that, maybe things like this will never happen again,
Well, thank you so much.